Hey guys, Percolator. In this video, we're going to continue to cover my most requested topic of single PC HomeLab. In the last video, I covered one of the most common ways I have seen people achieve this by using true NAS scale. In this video, we're going to cover my preferred solution to a one server HomeLab, and that is to use Proxmox as both a hypervisor and as a NAS. We are going to be doing this by using a LXC container running on top of Proxmox, and inside that container, we're going to be sharing out some NFS as well as SMB shares. We're going to be using a few tools like Cockpit and a few tools from 45 drives to achieve this. The hardware requirements are going to be very similar to the last video, but I will go over these requirements once again. The hardware needed is completely workload dependent. If all you are using your NAS for is to move around some files, you will not need a beefy server for this. However, if you plan to use this server for a Plex or Jellyfin server, I would suggest looking into a GPU or an Intel CPU with QuickSync. If you are studying for a certification or non-video related workload, a GPU could be completely worthless and a waste of power. Higher core count CPUs are great, but not required. ECC is fantastic if your board supports it, but it's not required for a lab. ECC, I would say, is required for something that you would consider productions, things you really don't want to lose. I would recommend researching the services that you would like to run to get a good rough idea of what kind of hardware you would benefit from. If you plan on having tons of storage, I would also suggest a good power supply with many SATA power connectors. I would stay away from SATA power splitters as they are very cheap, and I've heard many people over the years say they can be a fire hazard. I would also recommend staying away from SMR drives and instead buying CMR drives. There are many articles online detailing exactly why, and it's a bit much to get into in this video. If you have a workload that is light and does not require a ton of storage, a mini PC or an old laptop can work amazingly. My first HomeLab was an old laptop of mine, and it allowed me to do everything from learn the basics of networking to hosting a vanilla Minecraft server for many years. It was a great solution for when I started, but I would go ahead and say they are very limited when it comes to storage. If you think the hardware that you have is too weak, just give it a try and leave a comment below about your experiences and the details of your hardware, so that you may help others become inspired and give their hardware a go. In order to install Proxmox, first we need to get our image and make it bootable. My preferred method of doing this is to use Ventoy. This is the Ventoy website, and if you need to, you can head over here to downloads and you can download whatever you need for your respective operating system. In my case, I'm using Arch Linux, so I already have it currently installed. The command that I would run in order to install it would be paru tac-s ventoy. I already have that installed. If I was to run it now, all it would ask is which version I would want, and I could select a few things and it'll go ahead and reinstall it. Now that that's done, it should be installed. As you can see, it says reinstalling right here. In your case, you may have to install it another way. On Ubuntu and other operating systems, there's many ways of doing it. On Windows, all you need to do is download the zip and click the exe in order to run it that way. In my case, since I'm on Arch and I have it installed, all I need to do is sudo ventoy GUI. And once I have that typed, I will go ahead and pop up the Ventoy menu. From here, all I need to do is select the USB drive that I'd like to install this onto. In my case, it would be this 32 gig stick. And up here under options, I generally like to select this as GPT. You can use MBR or GPT, that's kind of up to you. I prefer GPT. And once we have it set to GPT, all we have to do is go ahead and press install. And as you can see, it'll give you a pop-up. This pop-up says that the device will be formatted, all the data will be lost. Would you like to continue? You click OK. It'll ask you again, just to make sure that you don't have any data on that disk that you're going to lose, and you press OK. After you do that, it'll give you a status bar, and once it finishes, you'll have Ventoy installed. Now that I've installed Ventoy onto that flash drive, I get a pop-up saying congratulations, Ventoy has been successfully installed to the device. From here, I can head back over to Firefox, and we can go ahead and navigate over to the Proxmox website. This is just proxmox.com, and under here, we need to go to the Proxmox virtual environment, or you can click virtualization. Once you're at virtualization, you can go down here and press download. And under download, we want to go ahead and grab the Proxmox VE 8.0 ISO installer. We can go ahead and press download, and it'll pop up in our download menu. Once this download is completed, we need to go ahead and move it over to our Ventoy installation. Now, as you can see, we have finished downloading Proxmox, and all we need to do is head over to our file manager, which is PCman FM in my case. And we're going to go ahead and move that to there so it's easier to see, and we're gonna go ahead and close Ventoy. From here, all we need to do is navigate to our downloads. Once we're in here, we can go ahead and copy Proxmox. We're gonna go ahead and move TrueNAS, and we're gonna go ahead and move Ubuntu desktop while we're here. From here, we can go ahead and press copy, head over to Ventoy. Now, in Ventoy, you're gonna have two partitions. There will be one called vtoy EFI. This is if you have used GPT anyway. You will have vtoy EFI and ventoy. You want to put your images under the one called ventoy. Now that those files have been moved over, we should be able to move on to the next step, which is booting off of this USB and installing Proxmox. In order to boot into ventoy, you may need to press F11, F12, F2, delete. It kind of depends on whatever your motherboard has set up as your option to get into your boot menu. Once you've found out whatever your boot menu is, you may need to keep track of this for if you need to use it in the future. In my case, it's F11. And once here, all I need to do is go down to UEFI FAT USB disk 2.0 PMAP, as this is my USB disk. And that is where I have ventoy installed. After selecting this, a few seconds later, I should be booted into ventoy. Now, as you can see, I have been booted into ventoy, and I have a couple of options for ISOs that I could boot from. The one that we're going to be booting from today is going to be Proxmox, but as you can see, we could choose whichever one of these we would like to boot into. Once we have Proxmox highlighted, we can go ahead and press enter to select it. And we're going to just select boot into normal mode. This will boot it just like it would any other time it would boot this ISO normally. Some of these other options are some extra options that ventoy has provided for us. Once selected, we'll be popped up with a menu asking how we would like to install Proxmox. In my case, I will go up to graphical, as this is the easiest way to install it. There's also console if you prefer doing it that way and you don't want to use a mouse. You do need a mouse if you are going to be using the graphical version to install Proxmox. Once this is selected, we'll be booting into the installer for Proxmox. This may take a few minutes. That took me approximately a minute or so in order to boot into Proxmox installer. That is due to having a relatively slow USB stick that I'm currently using, but once you are booted in, we can follow along with the on-screen instructions to install Proxmox. First, we can go down to this I agree. This is agreeing to the EULA. Next, this is where we'll actually be installing Proxmox 2. In my case, if we go to options, we want to use ZFS and we want to use ZFS 0 because we're only installing this on one drive and we're not going to be using a mirror. In my case, I want to deselect all so that I don't have anything selected, and I'm going to select the drive that I want to install this onto. As you can see, I have a couple of 4TB drives as well as this one NVMe, and that's where I'm going to be installing Proxmox to. Once I have that selected, there's also advanced options. If you want to, you can mess with some of this stuff. However, I don't recommend touching this unless you know what you're doing. From here, we can go ahead and press OK, and as you can see, we'll be installing ZFS and RAID 0 onto this NVMe drive. From here, we press OK, and we can go ahead and press next. Under here, we can select our country as well as our time zone. In my case, I need to scroll down until I see New York, which should be right here. And once that's selected, we can go ahead and head on to our next screen. Now we can set a password, and I'm just going to set a pretty simple password so that I can use it for this tutorial. And we can set us an email. You can set this to anything you would really want. In my case, we're just going to do this as example@gmail.com, and that should be fine as I'm not actually going to be using that for anything. Now we can set our fully qualified domain name. You can set this to whatever you would like. Generally, it'll be your host name followed by .land. And in my case, since this is on my NAS and this is the machine that I normally call Starscream, we're going to go ahead and type in starscream.land as it. And we can give it an IP address here. Now, this would be great if you want to go ahead and give it a static. This has already been set by DHCP for me, and I'm just going to leave it at 165 as I do have other machines that I would like to use certain addresses for. And since this is just a test for this video, I'm not going to be keeping this for a very long time afterwards, as this machine will go back to being my NAS after this. But you can set your static IP address here if you would like to, or a better option is to set your IP address in DHCP reservations. But that's something for another video. It automatically grabbed our gateway from our DHCP and automatically grabbed our DNS from our DHCP. From here, we can go ahead and press next. And that's all it is to install Proxmox. It's very simple, and you just have to select a few settings. Once you've done this, it'll say automatically reboot after successful install. You can leave this box checked, and I'm going to go ahead and press install. Once we've done this, as you can see, it'll give you some prompts down here telling you exactly what it's doing. And after a few minutes, you'll be booted back into Proxmox, hopefully. Now, as you can see, we have been rebooted into Proxmox, and we've been greeted with the grow up menu saying Proxmox virtual environment. We're going to go ahead and select OK, and we should be booting into Proxmox. Now, as you can see on the screen, we can navigate to this IP address in order to access our Proxmox instance. Now, all I've done is head over to Firefox or whatever browser you prefer and enter in the IP address followed by :8006. This is specifying the port that we need for Proxmox. From here, we'll get a potential security risk ahead, and we're going to go ahead down to advanced. And after a second, it'll have the box that says accept the risk and continue. From here, after clicking that, we'll be presented with Proxmox, and we can go ahead and log in as root and that password that we had set earlier. Now from here, we can continue to set up our Proxmox installation. The first thing we need to do in order to set up Proxmox is to go ahead and make sure that we can get updates. In order to do this, we're going to head over to the tab that has your fully qualified name. In my case, this is called Star Screen. And we're going to go ahead and head down to where it says repositories. Under here, we'll see we have some issues. Firstly, the enterprise repository is not enabled and there's no active subscription, but there is no active subscription. And the Ceph enterprise repository is enabled, but there's no active subscription. We can get rid of both of these pretty easily, or at least make it so that we can get updates. Firstly, Ceph, we're not going to be using, so we can go ahead and just disable that. And the enterprise repository, we're also not going to be using because we're going to be using the free repository. In order to add this, we click the add button and we select the repository. This is the no subscription repository. And as you can see, this is not recommended for production. However, they are pretty stable. I haven't had any issues with it. You can buy a subscription if you prefer to use the enterprise version. But as you can see, after clicking that, you get updates from Proxmox VE. The no subscription repository is not recommended for production use, and that is their warning, mostly to cover their own butts. But from here, we can go ahead and click reload and everything seems to be fine. And then we can go over here to updates and hit refresh. After hitting refresh, you'll say no valid subscription, and it'll pop up a bunch of gets saying that it's pulling all the updates that it can for Proxmox. After this is finished, it'll say task OK, and you can press exit, and you'll be presented with a bunch of packages that need to be updated. From here, all you need to do is press upgrade, and you'll get a pop-up saying, would you like to continue? You can go ahead and press enter, and it'll go ahead and install all the updates that Proxmox has. Now, as you can see, all of our updates have been installed, and it says that we got a new kernel, so we would like to consider rebooting. So we're going to go ahead and do that by typing reboot, and after a few seconds, our machine should be rebooted. From here, we can go ahead and close this window, and we can head back over to our Proxmox screen and press refresh. Eventually, this will come back just as it was before. Now that Proxmox has come back up, I'm going to go ahead and configure my disk. In my case, I'm going to head down to disk, and we're going to go ahead down to ZFS. In here, we're going to do create ZFS, and I'm going to name this tank 0. And tank 0, we're going to select our 4000 drives, these two, because these are the similar drives. And we're going to select a mirror. From here, we're going to go ahead and press create, and that'll run. Once this is done, it'll pop up saying done, and I'm going to go ahead and create another one. In my case, this will be called tank 0 or tank 1. And we're going to do a mirror once again, and we're going to select our final 2 disks and press create. Storage is configured. Next, we can move on to creating our container and grabbing our container template. First, in order to get our container template, we need to head over here to local, and we can head to where it says CT templates. If you have another place that you have your containers and ISO images stored, you may need to look into that storage. For me, it's just going to be in the default local, and then click templates. Under templates, we need to go in here and find Debian 12. Here it is. Once we have that, we can go down here and press download. And after a few seconds, it will go ahead and have downloaded the container template, as you can see. Once we've done that, we can go ahead and click exit, and we can go up here to where it says create CT. Under create CT, we have some options that we need to go ahead and set. Under CT ID, we can go ahead and give this an ID, whatever we would like. In my case, I'm just going to give it a 201, and we're going to name it a host name of NAS, because that's what this is going to be doing. We can go ahead and set a password. The password is going to be how you're going to log into the machine, and you'll need to remember that. Now we have one option here that we need to go ahead and talk about, and that is unprivileged container. If we want to do NFS, we are going to need to uncheck this box because we're going to need a privileged container. When this box is checked, it is an unprivileged container. When this box is not checked, it is a privileged container. Next, we can go ahead and select our template. In our case, we need to select Debian 12 standard, and we can go ahead and press next. After that, we can select where this is going to be installed at, and 8 gigs should be fine. And we want this to be on our fastest storage available so that our container is nice and snappy. So in my case, I'm just going to leave it on local CFS since this is a NVMe drive in my case, and 10 gigs should be, or 8 gigs should be fine enough. Next, we're going to go ahead and check our CPU. I want to go ahead and set this to 2 cores. You can do this on lower. 2 cores is probably what I'd recommend. Now we're at memory, and I'm going to go ahead and give this 1 gig of memory. This memory is not necessarily how much RAM it will take, it's how much it can take. So this is more of a cap and less of a hard what it's going to be using. So say for instance, if we only have 2 gigs of RAM on this machine and we set this to half of our RAM, and say it only uses half of a gig of RAM, so 512 megs, then, well, our VMs or other processes can use the other gig and a half, and it won't really conflict with this until this decides that it needs to go over that. In that case, it can start using swap, and you can set your swap to be higher if you would like. In my case, 1 gig and swap should be fine. Next, we're going to go ahead and head over to networking. And networking, you either need to set DHCP or you need to set a static address. In our case, I'm going to set a static address of 192.168.0.50. And we're going to give it in a gateway, which we also need to give it, which is 192.168.0.1. Also, we need to make sure this is insider notation. So we need to go ahead and give it a /24 in my case. Once we've done this, we can go ahead and press next. And it'll ask us our DNS settings. We can use the same as host in my case. If you have other DNS settings that you would like your containers to grab onto, then you may want to set those here. Now we're at the finished screen, and we can go ahead and click the start after created because we want this container to go ahead and start up immediately in this case. Now, after a few seconds, we have our container created and started. All we need to do is go over here and click the name of our container, and we'll be presented with our console. Inside of our console, we can go ahead and log in. You'll do this by using root and then by entering the password that we created while we were making the container. Once this is done, you'll be presented with the normal Debian login screen. We can go ahead and update this machine by typing in apt update and apt full upgrade and press enter. Once we've done that, we should go ahead and grab all the latest updates for Debian 12. If you're presented with a prompt, it should be, would you like to continue? And you can go ahead and press enter or press Y and then press enter. Now that we have our updates, we can go ahead and install Cockpit. In order to do this, we can do apt install Cockpit. And then we want to give it the option no install recommends. This is because we don't need any of the extra stuff that Cockpit normally brings with it, such as managing network or drives or any of that stuff, because we're doing all of that with Proxmox. So we don't need any of the extra features. We just want to use it for the UI and to install a couple of plugins to manage a few things. From here, all we need to do is press enter, and if it asks you if you would like to continue, go ahead and press enter again. After a few seconds, we should have Cockpit installed. Now that we have Cockpit installed, we can go ahead and install our extra plugins that we have from 45 drives. The first one we're going to go ahead and grab is going to be the Cockpit file share, and this is going to make file sharing a bit easier and give us a nice UI in order to do this. All we need to do is head over here to the releases tab, go down to where it says the .deb package, right click, hit copy link, and head back over to our NAS. Here, all we need to do is type wget and paste in that link. Once we've done that, it'll successfully download. Next, we can head over to Navigator and do the same thing. Head over here to releases, find the .deb, right click, copy link, head back, wget, paste it in, and it should go ahead and download. And then lastly, we can do this for identities, which will help us manage our users using Cockpit. So once again, we head over to releases, go to .deb, copy link, head back to our Proxmox, go ahead and do wget and paste this in. Once we have all of those pasted in, all we need to do is go ahead and install those. In order to install a local Debian package, all you need to do is type apt install, and then we're going to give it a /, and then in our case, since we have multiples, we want to say all using a *.deb. Once we've done this, all we need to do is press enter, and it'll prompt us if we would like to go ahead and install the other packages that we need for this, and we can go ahead and press enter, and we should go ahead and install those packages. Now we will be presented with an error, and this is expected. It's a permission denied, and this is because the apt user is the one that actually installs the packages, and the files are currently located in the root directory. So it can't actually delete those files. In order to fix this, all we need to do is type remove star.deb in the folder that the deb files are located, and we can go ahead and delete those. If we go ahead and do ls, now those are gone. That's all that error is. After that error has been dealt with, we can go ahead and move on to the next step, which is to add some options to our container itself. In order to do this, we need to go ahead and shut down the container. And once that's done, we need to head over to our host machine and go over to its shell. Once we're at its shell, we need to go ahead and type in this command. This is going to be nano/etc/pve/lxc/ the number of the container .config. Once we've done that, we can go ahead and press enter, and it'll allow us to edit some of the parameters that machine has. In our case, we need to go ahead and enter this as it is written. That is lxc.apparmor.profile, unconfined. Once we've done that, we can go ahead and press Control O to save, press enter, and Control X to close. We can go ahead and start back our container up. And once it's started, we should be back to where we were before. And now we should be able to go ahead and open up our new link, and we'll be presented with Cockpit. Once we're here, we can go ahead and log in as root, which is root, and then the password that we configured earlier. Now, as you can see, I have a bit of an error saying this is the wrong username and password, but I'm confident this is correct. This is because we need to go ahead and log in as root here. And we need to configure Cockpit so that we can log in as the root user. In order to do this, all we need to do is do nano/etc/cockpit. And then we need to look for the file called disallowed users. And we need to edit this so that either we comment or we can completely remove root. In my case, I'm just going to go ahead and comment it out, press Control O, and then enter to save, and then can press Control X in order to exit. Now, if we head back over here and press login, we should be able to log in after that refreshes. A quick note there, I had to close the tab and reopen the tab in order for me to log in. I'm not exactly sure why, but that was what was required in order to log back in. We're logged back in, and we need to go ahead and give our container some storage so that it can actually share out some kind of storage other than that 8 gigs that we gave it initially. To do this, we can head back over to our Proxmox and head down to our NAS and go over to resources. In resources, we can go to add and add mount point. Here, we can go ahead and select some paths. So we're going to go ahead and name this -mmt/SAMB. So we're going to name it Samba, and we're going to be storing this on our tank 0, and we're going to go ahead and give it, let's say, 1000 gigs. So that should be roughly a terabyte. Once we've done that, we can go ahead and press create, and we should be good. Now, I'm also going to be showing how to do NFS, so I'm going to go ahead and create the mount point while we're here. Once again, I'm going to select the same storage. We're going to go ahead and give this 1000 again, and we're going to give it the same path, but instead of Samba, we're going to go ahead and give it NFS. Once we've done that, we can go ahead and press create, and both of these should show up. We can head back over to our cockpit, and we can go to navigator, we can go to -mnt, and we can see both of our folders are here. These are both of our shares, and each one of these should have about a terabyte of storage in them. Storage is taken care of, so we can move on to creating our shares. In order to do this, we're going to start with an SMB share first, or a Samba. In order to start, we can go ahead and head over to identities and go to groups. Under groups, we can hit the tag that says create new group, this little plus icon, and we can create a new group. We're going to go ahead and call this Samba users, and we're going to go ahead and press create. Once we've done that, we can go ahead and head to identities and head over to users. Under users, we're going to hit create new user, and we're going to go ahead and name the user perk. In our case, you can name this whatever you would like. I would recommend keeping it under 8 characters if at all possible though. After this, we can go down to login shell, and you may be tempted to set no login as you may not want this user to log in. However, since we want them to have access to Navigator, they need to actually be able to log into this. So we're going to leave them as bash, and we're going to go ahead and add them to the group that we just created. This should be called Samba users, and there'll be one called Samba share and Samba users. Samba share is the default. However, it doesn't show up in some of the menus, so that's why I went ahead and opted to create Samba user. Once we've done that, we go ahead and press apply, and we can set a password for this user. You can set this to something simple, or you can set this to something very secure, depending on how long you're going to be keeping this around for. In my case, I don't really need it to be super secure, so I'm just setting it to a generic password. Once we've done that, We can go ahead and press apply, and if the password doesn't satisfy the strength requirements, if you press apply again, it'll go ahead and force it. Now we'll get a couple of pop-ups, and you can go ahead and click some of these if you would like. You can read over them and see exactly what they do. In my case, I'm gonna go ahead and press fix SSH, and we're gonna go ahead and exit out the rest of these. Once we've done that, we need to scroll down to where we see Samba, and we need to set us a Samba password. This can be the same password. However, because Samba and Linux use different hashing algorithms to store its password, you can't have these set at the same time. I guess you could, but in our case, it doesn't do that for us. We just need to go ahead and enter a Samba password and press apply. Once again, you can press apply again to use a password that it doesn't deem as completely strong. Now that we've done that, we can head over to our file sharing. And all we need to do is we can go ahead and give it a server description, which I'm just going to name file shares, and we can leave the rest of the global settings default. From here, we go down to shares, and we can press the add button, and we can create our share here. We can go ahead and name it something. I'm just going to name this SMB share to keep it simple. And we're going to go ahead and give it the path of that file that we created earlier. So we're going to do /mmt/samba. And we're going to go down here to where it says edit permissions. Under edit permissions, we need to go ahead and give our group read, write, and execute access. And we need to go down to group, and we need to select Samba users. After we've done that, we can press apply. And we can go to valid groups and select our Samba users. This should make our permissions correct so that anybody that's part of the Samba user group can create, read, write, and execute files within the Samba directory. Once we've done that, we can head down to our permissions, and we can select this based off of what we're doing with it. Say, for instance, if you're in a Windows-only environment, I would highly suggest just checking the box that says Windows ACLs. In my case, since I'm going to be accessing this from Linux, I'm going to go ahead and do Windows ACL with Linux and Mac support. This doesn't always work great on Linux, but it's been pretty good from my experience with it. I have seen people have complaints about it or have issues that come up due to using this, but for what we're using it for, this should be completely fine. Now that we've done that, we can go ahead and press confirm, and it'll go ahead and create our Samba share. Now I'm going to go ahead and head over to PCMan-FM, which is my file manager, and we're going to go ahead and show that I can connect to that. So in order to connect to it on a PCMan-FM, all we do is SMB// followed by the IP address, / followed by the IP address 192.168.0.50, and we're going to give it the name of our share. So in our case, as we can see there, it's Samba share. So we just name it SMB share and press enter. Now it'll go ahead and ask us to register our user. We can go ahead and enter the name of the user that we'd like to log into, in our case, Perk, and we can go ahead and enter the password that we created as our Samba password. After we press connect, we should be inside of our Samba share. In order to test this, we can go ahead and press new file and go ahead and create a folder, and we can just name this test. Once we've done that, we'll see that test pops up, and we can head back over to our navigator. Under navigator, if we go into Samba, we should see the folder that we created, meaning that we have permissions to read, write, and execute inside of this folder. This means that we should be able to create things in here that we want to. So for instance, if I wanted to, I could head over to this and I can create files, move stuff over here, or say for instance, if I wanted to, I could head over to our test, go ahead and press copy, go back to here and paste it in there. If we head back to navigator and reload the page, we'll see that that file exists. That is all there is for setting up a SMB share, and you can create other shares if you would like to. Say you could go in here and you could create subdirectories, or you could go ahead and create back to here and add new mount points for each subdirectory that you would like to have. That's completely up to you and is a reasonable way of doing it. We can move on to setting up NFS now. NFS, I'm not going to go over all of the exact permissions. We're just going to set up a NFS share that can be accessible to anybody that decides to, and we're only going to be using the host to determine who can access it. If you would like to, you can set this to the IP address of the machine that you would like to access it from. And in our case, we're going to go ahead and set the path to -mmt/NFS, which is the path that we created earlier. And we're going to go ahead and go to edit permissions. And we're going to set the read, write, execute, and we're going to go ahead and set other as well. Now, if you would like to, you can go through and create better permissions for this if you understand NFS permissions. And I would highly recommend looking into it, as going over NFS permissions is a bit complicated for this video. So we're just going to leave this as default and go ahead and press apply. Once we've done that, we can go down here to press apply, and we should have this NFS share being able to be mounted. We just need to go own and do so. Now I have gone ahead and written out the command that we need to do in order to mount our NFS share. And this is sudo mount-t NFS 192.168.0.50, which is the IP address of the machine, followed by the path. And then we're going to go ahead and mount it to -mmt-temp. Once we press enter, we'll be prompted for our password, and we can go ahead and press enter. Now we should be able to see that we are mounted there. How do we do this? We can go ahead and cd to -mmt-temp. And inside of here, we can go ahead and do a touch test 1. And now we can head back over to our navigator, and we should see that under NFS, we should have a file called test1. NFS permissions can be a bit complicated, so I'm not going to cover them in detail in this video. However, this will work for a general setup, and it'll allow all users to be able to write to it. This is not great as far as security. However, for a small NFS setup, this should be completely fine. We may come back and cover NFS in a future video whenever I go over NFS shares. We have SMB as well as NFS set up, and we have Proxmox to be able to run our hypervisors. As far as I'm concerned, this is a pretty good one PC HomeLab. It has file sharing in that we can use SMB and NFS, and we have a pretty good hypervisor running as well. That is going to be all for today's video. In the next video, I'm going to cover virtualizing TrueNAS scale inside of Proxmox. If you liked the video, please leave some kind of feedback. And remember to like, comment, and subscribe, as it helps me grow the channel and motivates me to make more content in the future. If you really enjoy my content, hit the notification bell so you'll be notified whenever I post a video. This is Perculator, signing out.